life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Racially Speaking. I'm your host, David Phipps, and man, look, happy 2025. Glad to be back on here this first month of the year. I'm really excited. I got some good guests coming up this year, and we're going to keep this thing moving. We're about to turn, I think, 4 years old later this month, maybe just next week. Anyway, I'm not one to typically talk a lot about anniversaries and celebrating big milestones or anything, but 4 years. I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. Anyway, I'm not going to waste any time getting into this conversation. I'm pumped. I got another one of my young cats here in my living room this late evening. He's, like we like to say, burning the midnight oil here on the podcast with me after all the kiddos are down. He just got off a fresh shift down the street working at a restaurant. So, look, I'm joined by just an all-around good dude, soon to be Radford University graduate. An aspiring, you're going to make it. An aspiring educator / you're kind of a current educator already. Youth minister.
Sure.
College, campus ministry, student leader. Man, you got a lot of dope titles, man. Radford City citizen.
Townie.
First and foremost, townie, like we have to say around the small town. Ethan Bishop. Ethan, thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man.
I'm a listener, so I'm glad
I appreciate it.
I'm glad to actually get the chance to speak and
I appreciate
and
you, man.
Talk to you.
Yeah. Well, look, let's jump in. I said that you said you're a townie. Mm-hmm. So you're Radford Townie.
Yep. Born and raised.
For those of y'all not watching the video, which y'all should watch the video, see Ethan's beautiful face, and yeah, y'all should just watch. Anyway. You're a young, good-looking white brother on the Racially Speaking podcast. I love it, man. Super intentional having you on here, though, because, man, we have lived a lot of life together these last 2 to 3 to 4 years we've known each other.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to ask you some questions and hear more about your life as it intersects with, I'm going to say, thriving, multi-ethnic community, ministry, whatever you want to say. That's where my heart is. You know that. That's where listeners, that's where I'm at on this podcast. And Ethan, man, you've got a lot to offer with, I think, our white listeners and people of color who listen. And so I'm excited to get into this. So you grew up, born and raised in Radford, Virginia,
Radtown. That's us.
What we'll get to all the hats you wear that I kind of just listed off real quickly, but describe a little bit about, especially for people that might not know Radford, how you describe your upbringing living in this little town.
Yeah.
That I'd say on paper lacks some diversity.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. What you got?
Radford, it's a pretty small town. We got like 17,000 people, I think, give or take. College town, as I'm sure a lot of the listeners know, and with David being on staff at Radford University. So it definitely got a little bit of a college town vibe. We don't really necessarily have the sports atmosphere as much of like another college town might. But you can go like 30 minutes up the road and we got Virginia Tech. And so typically, I feel like growing up here, it's like you're like, okay, Radford's cool. I'll root for Radford if I see them in March Madness or something like that. But typically, I feel like most people are like, we root for the Hokies.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty small town. You really grow up just knowing most people. So, like, I went to school from like kindergarten all the way through 12th, like knowing kind of like the core group. Obviously, people would move in here and there. But for the most part, like, I would like. The kids that were like in my preschool class were the kids that I graduated with.
Wow. How big's your graduating class in Radford?
We had, I think, 120.
Okay.
So not a huge school for sure.
Yeah.
But honestly, I enjoyed the smaller kind of school size.
Yeah.
Because again, like you said, like I could kind of just get to know all the people around.
Yeah.
So it's mostly, yeah, like you said, it's actually the poverty rate in Radford's pretty high.
Yeah.
I grew up in a kind of upper middle class family. My dad was an engineer. My mom is a teacher.
Okay.
So we grew up pretty comfortable and fine. So it wasn't really anything like that.
Yeah.
So you just really get to know a lot of the people that you're around. I think the people here are pretty friendly and pretty kind for the most part.
Yeah.
So it's just got like the small town atmosphere. Like even at the restaurant that I work at, like I saw probably 3-4 families tonight that are like, I just grew up with them.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
So it's fun of like, or like when I used to work at the coffee shop that was down the road. It's like I would be able to just come in and see so many people that like, I knew their kids because I went to school with them, or they graduated with my older sister or something like that. Yeah. So it's a town like where you know most people, and most people are fairly well off and pretty comfortable, I would say. So I think if that's maybe one word to describe Radford, I think kind of comfortable.
Okay, comfortable. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's accurate. I've been here 15 years or so, give or take. So, all right. So your upbringing, you did a great job describing it. I mean, how would you say, so people outside looking in, I mean, I guess inside looking in too, know that Radford, Virginia isn't known for being a diverse area. And I'm just saying the facts. Like, I'm not saying that with a negative tone, but at this point right now. So just asking you as somebody that's born and raised here, and then knowing you now in a lot of conversations we've had over the last few years, I'd wonder how you would like describe growing up here. And so actually, first I'll say, I see it kind of both ways. I'd wonder if you agree with this. I think percentage-wise, like demographics, we're like Radford is 95, 97% white. And then, but I also, as I've lived here, keep seeing, hey, Radford is actually a lot more diverse than people realize it is. So I kind of see it both. Like, as I get to know the townie side of things, and even getting to know even some of the public school kids and stuff, it's like, well, my kids are now in elementary school, so I'm like, man, this, it is predominantly a white area, but it doesn't feel to me like it's 97% white, if that makes sense. Yeah. Would I want it to be way more diverse? Absolutely. Yeah. But anyways, I'd wonder, do you agree with that? Yeah. Okay. Would you say that was accurate of your upbringing too? Like experience?
I'd say so. Okay. Yeah, like, I mean, I think, like, if I look back at pictures, like, when I was kind of growing up, like, I'd say I was mostly, like, around, like, other white people, like, when I was, like, in terms of, like, my friends, like, growing up in school, like, other people that my family was, like, kind of, like, hanging out with, I'd say was majority white. But then, like, when you'd walk into the high school or do something like that, like, I feel like it felt pretty mixed in some sense.
That's interesting. I could ask more townies if they would agree with our assessment here. Yeah. All right, but anyway, kind of fast forward, as most of my relationship with you has in multiple ways intersected because of our mutual desire to prioritize being around more people of color and pursuing more thriving multi-ethnic culture and/or ministry around us. So we're part of the same church, which that's a high priority, and you're a student leader with our campus ministry that I also work for. And so we've also seen a lot of thriving multi-ethnic community and ministry going on there, and that's been a huge part of your beliefs, faith, and just kind of personal conviction. Yeah. So I'd wonder, would you say you've kind of you've always felt like that growing up in Radford, seeing a majority culture, like you said, being around mostly white people? Yeah. And it's not a critique on white people, but did you always feel, and/or when did you feel, oh man, I really see a need and a desire to prioritize this in my personal surroundings, but then also in the surroundings for others? Because I would say for me, and I've shared this on the podcast plenty of times, but it came much later in life. I'm Asian, but I grew up around mostly white people.
Yeah.
And I didn't always have this desire. But so fill me in, fill our listeners in. Where would you say, can you pinpoint when you felt like that? Do you feel like you've always felt like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was something like I never really thought too much of in terms of like, I just never like really thought like growing up like too much about, okay, like I'm in the majority right here. Like, like, you know, I look at this at my classroom that I'm in, like I never, like it just never came as like really a thought to me, that I was like, okay, I'm actually like in the majority here. So it was like, I was like always like growing up, I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, you know, I'm around a bunch of people and, but it was never like a running thought of like, okay, like I need like, there needs to be more diversity like in my mix.
Okay.
And then I'd say, yeah, like when I kind of started, when I started to follow Jesus and started to actually pursue that and choose a life with Jesus. I think it's more. I think one is I was learning more and more about it. Like even after I met you and learned about your heart with it and found out about the vine and being able to hear their heart behind a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multicultural, like all these things like within the church.
Yeah. So what stuck out to you about those things?
Yeah. Honestly, like I just find myself like fascinated by just other cultures and other like growing up here. Yeah, so many people like, I don't want to say maybe that's a generalization, but I think so many people like we just live similar lives. And so I think like I just found myself almost being fascinated in some sense of like, and maybe even made more human in some sense. I think in being able to be around someone that lived like a completely different upbringing than I did. Yeah. But in the way that we're able to like really connect with each other, I was like, this is really like cool. And this is like something that like I just find a lot of joy in. And so like I got connected with the Vine and kind of was even just started off there like as like curious of like, okay, like what do I actually like kind of believe with this? What do I actually like, where's my heart like lean towards?
Yeah. The Vine being, for anybody listening, the Vine being the church that we go to that is in Blacksburg, which feels like hours away because we're in Radford and everything's 5 minutes away. Yeah. But
so like I joined there and then I think it was through hearing about their mission and they did like a sermon series on like racial justice and diversity and the multicultural like mission of it. I was like, oh, this is like really fascinating. And then it just started hanging out with like guys. Like when I got to Radford University and would meet guys that from the 757, like from Virginia Beach and Norfolk and Hampton and meeting people from Nova and meeting people from really all around. And there was just such a joy in being able to connect with these people. That like I just I think of a funny one of like we went on a hike one time and they just had like never like been on a hike before. And like for me like that's so like I'm like we just grew up going on hikes here.
Being from Norfolk, I'm not a hiker. Not a hiker.
so I'm just like oh my gosh, this is like fascinating. Like this was my like we just always learned and thought of like, oh, you go out and you ride four-wheelers and you do these things, and for other people like, that's so foreign. So I think it's a lot of that. So just being fascinated, and also I think just almost being humbled in some sense of being like, man, the world is so much bigger than me, and there's so many just different ways to live and ways that aren't necessarily like the right way to live in some sense.
I love that it's really interesting, and I love that it directly correlates with your faith. And so when like what year did you start following Jesus?
2021, I think.
2021, okay.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah, man.
I'm pretty sure.
That was one interesting time, 2020, 2021.
Yeah.
Time. Man, for that to happen and then for your desire immediately to kind of start to grow at that time is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah.
I even want to like get into the trenches. Like I like to stay on here a little bit with asking you even about that time period. So I remember at a fall retreat with Crew Campus Ministry a couple years ago when our speaker asked, I think asked during one of the main meetings to a bunch of us, said just what is your culture? Like just to everybody, like just shout it out. Like what would you say is something unique to what you do, like in your family? Like what's your cultural tradition or something? Just shout something out. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you're laughing, so I think you remember. But I think that you said you're one of the people who spoke up and said something about like I'm white and I don't have a culture or something, or I'm privileged, something like that. You might have said, I can't remember if you said a buzzword like privilege or something like that.
I don't know if I said privilege.
Okay,
but maybe like something along the lines of like maybe not culture, maybe something along the lines of privilege. I don't remember my exact wording, but I do remember of like. Just something saying, like I said, hi, I'm Ethan. I'm white.
Okay, maybe that's all you said.
I may have said something else. Honestly, I don't remember.
So I would wonder why you said that. Meaning, not necessarily why you said that. Like, think back to the exact moment. Like, what was like why you said it, but where did that come from? Because you, like Gen Z, you guys are just in the midst of. I'd say like the most polarizing time that I may have heard from people way older than me would say this. Like you're in just maybe the most polarized culture ever, politically and every which way, religiously.
Yeah.
Why? Like, I think some people would hear you say something like that, and a lot of people like to chalk that type of sentiment up to, oh, well, you're just going with. Whatever culture, woke culture, you're just a puppet for that set of beliefs. What would you say like went into that as you've like already shared about, well, I just like really cared or like was even fascinated with caring about other cultures that I didn't grow up around. And then when someone asks you, hey, shout out your culture, and for you to like say, I'm white and kind of make fun of yourself, but also you understand what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there's a group of people that are like, oh, well, he's shaming himself or shaming white culture, or he's saying that because he wants to be a cool, like, left-leaning, liberal-sounding person. Like, what would you say to those kind of stereotypes behind why you said something like that?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think for me, and even maybe, kind of like what you're saying, and it may be in some way. It's like, I mean, I just never really had to grow up with, like, feeling like the minority or feeling, in some sense, like different, or kind of like an outsider in some sense. And so, like, I think, like, when, like, I've actually, like, really kind of thought about it and leaned into it a little bit more, like, it's not like everything's, like, been handed to me in my life. And even, like, my family's, like path, like, through this, like, they both had to work really, really hard to, like, get to the point where they got to. But I think, like, and it's obviously not the case for all white people. Like, there are definitely white people that are in pretty just tough areas and in tough walks of life. Yeah.
I mean, you touched on Radford being, you know, so many people below the poverty line. Like, it's not a super wealthy area, predominantly white. So acknowledging that, so there's nuance there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think like when I give a response like that, I guess it's just, I'm trying to think of even how to say it. But kind of like I think in some way, like, even just as white people, like, I think we can kind of joke on each other. We're like, oh, like, you go and we can't dance, or kind of coming up, like, it's almost like a fun thing to like joke on the white person, if that makes sense. So it's always just been something that I've been like pretty like kind of comfortable with, and also just kind of grown up with. It's where like white people will just kind of joke on ourselves of like, you know, I might not be the most rhythmic person, but I'll go out on the dance floor and give it my all.
You will. I've seen you do it.
So, like I think it kind of comes from that, where it's like, like I've just been able to just grow up with like kind of a joking kind of side of it.
Gotcha.
To where, but then it also kind of comes easy in that sense of like, they don't necessarily have to worry too much about like someone really taking it to heart too much or thinking in some way, because like it's just been other people like me. And there's been most spaces before I got to college, like where I kind of grown up in, and even still can be in sometimes. Like even when I did summer mission with Crew in Chicago, like it was one of the first times like I would go into a workplace. Like I was working at Chick-fil-A in downtown, and I was like one of the only white people that was like in that place, and it was like one of the first times like I ever like actually really felt that.
That's a great example. So. First time you felt that. So what was that like?
Is it? Yeah.
Beyond the, I don't know, like awkwardness, was there ever thoughts of, not fear, but like, was there thoughts of insecurity or, I don't know, maybe anything? Like, what was that like? Because I feel like that's the kind of thing that you don't know till you are in it.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there probably was some insecurity in that, or even like an insecurity in myself to be able to connect with this person.
Okay.
Because like we're on like a kind of mission trip.
Yeah.
And so like our goal is to like talk about our faith in our workplace and get to do life with the people that we're with. But I think like finding myself in the kind of beginning aspect of it, of like. Do I really know how to like connect with this person? Like, I mean, some of the people that worked at my Chick-fil-A, like they grew up on like 63rd Street in Chicago, which is like pretty known of being like a lot of gun violence and things like that. So there was like some aspect of like even maybe feeling from my own self, like feeling like they were just judging me of like, oh, this little white boy is coming up from the South, because they would know me and they knew like. Our crew trip was partnered with this Chick-fil-A. So like we had like 13 people or so from our trip like working at this Chick-fil-A. So they knew like what we were with and like what we were doing. But I think even from my own aspect, I would think of them in some way of like almost like judging me in some way, which they weren't. But I would kind of feel like from those insecure thoughts in some way of being able to. Like, oh man, like I've just had it pretty easy. But then these kids, like, they're 17 years old and they were like a shift lead and manager because they had to.
So were any of them like superior to you?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Like my manager was 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like would go to high school.
So did you feel like there was a natural? Did you feel like even if you didn't feel like you had a chip on your shoulder because of that? Did you feel like maybe they had a natural one, like, oh, I got a pull rank over this older college kid?
They were pretty chill.
White college kid
like,
from the
definitely
South.
As time went on, like we got pretty comfortable with each other.
Okay, that's awesome.
Which was really cool.
Yeah.
So like we'd just be like out in the drive-thru, just like joking with each other and doing stuff. So it wasn't necessarily anything like that, and they were pretty chill for the most part. So it didn't necessarily feel like, oh, like I just get to boss around this college guy. Yeah. Which I was probably pretty impressionable at the at the time.
So you gave your life to Jesus 2021. Yeah. Is this also 2021 or 2022?
Because I gave my life to Jesus going into from 2021 to 2022. Okay. Like I gave my life to the Lord on New Year's Eve of 2021. Okay. And so then started getting involved like with Radford stuff after I did that. And then not that summer, but then the summer after that is when I went to Chicago.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome.
So
I envy your trajectory because I feel like, and I'm not saying you didn't, like none of it was hard or painful, but I think we would have naturally we would have different experiences. I'm acknowledging, but I think of a lot of pain as I became more aware of how to get into these conversations and feeling the need and call to do so and to pursue it. and I still have a natural, and I feel like maybe I always will, but I have a natural defensiveness and or chip on my shoulder sounds too simplistic, but walls up unless I'm shown that I can let them down. And I'm just very justice oriented, but I'm also aware that that's like, that's not the only way to go about things to pursue thriving multi-ethnic community ministry or whatever. I love that your trajectory has kind of just been, this is awesome. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you've been proven right. Like, and you're reaping the benefits of it and enjoying it. And it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of deliberation on your part of like, oh man, I don't know if I want to take this big step to be part of a multi-ethnic church or lead campus ministry with, people from not Radford, a lot of people of color, be part of a giant campus ministry with, that is really doesn't reflect the demographics of the surrounding area, but it's super, super diverse. And you've just like laid into like, this is all I know and this is awesome versus, oh man, this is really going to take like some prioritization and like heavy stuff. I'd love to hear if there is on the flip side any of that, if there's been any moments where you felt like the weight of it, not like you were carrying the weight, but like, oh, everyone's not on board with this. Like this does take some commitment, specifically like racially speaking, ethnically speaking, to keep the needle moving versus just, oh, it's just going to be fun and easy.
Yeah.
I also am like, that's awesome to hear. And I've heard this from a lot of Gen Zers too of like, well, this is like just what is the better thing. Like diversity is better than non-diversity. So it's been awesome versus it doesn't always have to be this, like I said, polarized, like, oh, you're a woke person versus let's just let it be type person. I don't know if there's a question there, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think even kind of like you said, like it hasn't even necessarily been something like I feel like my own self has like actively pursued to some extent. Like going to Chicago was definitely like a step out.
Yeah.
Like
you knew that wasn't going to be just a larger Radford.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's not fully true to say that because I mean we were even like our main mission work was at University of Illinois Chicago, which is like one of the most diverse campuses like in the entire country.
Yeah.
Like top 9. Like
wow.
I think it was number 9
wow.
in terms of. So like I was meeting people from like Mongolia and India and people from all around. But like in so many cases, like even just when I showed up to Radford, like it was pretty diverse. Like when I first kind of showing up, and
you came at a dope time.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the time that I did start to come, and then like as like we've just been really working and it's almost just felt like it's just come in somewhat of a natural way. Like people have just been inviting their friends and their people that are in their classes and the people that they're playing basketball with.
Yeah.
And so it's all just kind of like come together without even necessarily feeling like I have to like kind of fight tooth and nails for.
Yeah.
So in terms of that, like I think, we've been really blessed in that aspect, that it hasn't necessarily felt as something. I mean, obviously I know you're a driving force in terms of, people know you and people know your heart and as you being on staff and being on staff with one of the campus and also crew as an organization, like people just know your heart and kind of know where you're at. And then I think it's also just fled into other things as well. Like moving into the Vine. Like it's one of the only churches in this area that I think is really has that like vision of a multi-ethnic community as like one of the driving forces. And so like, and I think I've even seen it more within the church of actually fighting a little bit more for it. So you can still look at our congregation and it's like we've got people from different walks of life and pretty solid diversity there, but I'd still say the majority of the congregation is white. And so it's been cool to hear and kind of get to be just listen and know the leadership team there and know the members there, and actively see this as like something that we're striving for.
Yeah.
Which I think is just really cool to just see and be a part of.
Yeah.
So you kind of get the two sides of it that I think in terms of Radford's crew and the campus ministry, like it's felt like just pretty natural and hasn't necessarily been something that like I think has like we've actually had to fight for. Maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But then I think like with our church, like you see more of that, like with that vision statement in hand of like having a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational.
Yeah.
That's still something that like we're working for.
For sure.
Really wanting to envision more and more.
Yeah. No, I'd love to hear, as I share my thoughts, even hear more of your thoughts, because I mean, I've given you, especially recently because we've been talking, but giving you some cheat codes, but I want to know like what has been your experience as a crew, like college ministry leader. Ethan, listeners, helps lead our student leaders with crew, and so what's been your experience? Because a lot of the things I've told you have been intentional. Like our vision with Radford Crew, Campus Ministry on Campus, is that every student of every culture would know somebody that truly follows Jesus. So essentially everyone from every culture will be welcome in our ministry, which has not always been felt like it's always been a priority. It hasn't. It's never been anyone's been excluded, but it's always been, anyway. The history of it, some of you know, but is that we really want to care about that every culture part as much as we can.
Yeah.
Are we ever doing it perfectly? No, but that's been a huge reason why we're a very diverse ministry right now, which is really cool. But so you know a lot about what the intentionality behind the scenes has been over the years with me and then our staff team. I'd wonder what are some things that whether it's because you grew up in Radford or not, like what has been things that you've seen that you just noticed that are different, or that that's been a huge reason why these students feel welcome here. Or I'm not necessarily asking you to speak for people specifically, but if you've noticed like the vision of the DNA, the fruits of that, and then I'd love to hear even some of your thoughts on your experience leading youth at our church, because that's the younger generation. Like you said, multi-generational and multi-ethnic is our vision over there. And so you, like I said, you wear a lot of hats, and you have a lot of positions where I mean, leading, your task was leading, but I think, like you said, a lot of that probably for you involves maybe some stepping back and like, man, all right, how am I going to lead under these kind of visions?
Yeah.
That makes sense. So I know that's a lot. I'm the king of long-winded questions, but
I'm all here for it.
I can tell you're following. So
Yeah.
What you got?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just coming of, I'll do crew at Radford as like the first one. Like if you take a step back and see like our group on like a Thursday nights, which is our large group meetings, like I think if you take a step back and you really look at how people interact with each other, they're not really changing themselves in some sense, which I think is really cool, because I think that's the temptation. Like when you start to get like a diverse community, that you want to kind of assimilate into these other people's cultures. But I think what's been really cool to kind of see, and I think what should be kind of like the driving part of it, is a people like where we can be different and connect in some way through Jesus. Like when we took a spring break trip with crew, and I would just like sit and watch our group, and I would just laugh. I was like, this is just really cool to see that this group of people has all been put together, but they're just smiling and just having the best time with each other. So I think that's part of even, like what's been really beautiful to watch is that we've had like a really diverse group, but it's been people who haven't changed themselves in some sense. Like we're people who are trying to be more like Jesus, but I think we're also like, I mean, even Adam and Eve, like from creation, like there was difference. And so I think we see like the difference being able to complement each other in a really beautiful and fun way to watch, which has been really awesome. So I think like even just in my own experience, like I've just gotten to connect with so many different guys, and even as like our student leader director, if you want to give me that position.
No, I mean, that's your position. Yeah, that's your position.
Which is just a fancy word that I just get to encourage our leadership team, but and tell them that they're doing awesome and to keep on doing it. But yeah, like I think even just being able to just like sit around and joke with a bunch of the guys that we have, and them, and even like our own cultures being able to kind of clash with each other in a cool way. So I think one is just a lot of being able to be vulnerable in our own walks, and I think the more and more that we hear each other's stories, like we just become to love more deeply. Like I think to some extent, like we love what we know, and so to know something more, I think we start to love it more and actually give our heart a place to feel. And so I think good listening and good like asking good questions has just been something that I've just really fallen in love with, and enjoyed just getting to connect with people over that, of asking people questions about their life and what was it like in certain aspects. So I think in terms of crew at Radford, a lot of it just comes with, there's a vulnerability of that we don't necessarily have to feel judged or have to feel in some way like this person is different, and so we must like become more like one another, but allowing those personalities to shine while also asking good questions and doing life with each other. So in terms of that one, I think just good listening and being and allowing us a place of vulnerability. And I think vulnerability not in a sense of weakness, but in a sense of like we take courage, and like a lot of us have had tough upbringings, and we came to know Jesus, and we're here together, and we know that we're here together for the rest of our lives, wherever we go. So I think for that one, that's kind of where I'm at.
I love that. Our whole like Thursday night group, like our ministry is very diverse, and like I think in a cool, thriving place. Again, could always be better for sure. I love our small group. I have the privilege of leading you, Ethan, and our senior men's small group. And man, like I love our group, and I think our group is a great picture of everyone being able to be their full selves. Like we get wild, and I pinpoint this because I think it's important for people to hear that. I think that's just it's not just that we're a diverse group, but like just to visually, like we're not just a diverse looking group, but we are a diverse group with different perspectives that could maybe clash at times, and we have extremely different upbringings. Throw me in there. There's different generations. Don't know in there different generations as your leaders, but then also like everyone's able to be their full selves. And I think that as it's important to pinpoint for people like listening that we're able to complement each other, but that doesn't always mean we have to, like that goes for white people too. We don't have to hide who we are either. That doesn't mean because we have more people or more cultures or more diversity that everyone has to shrink back. Like, no, like, especially in a ministry setting, like that's the opposite. Like we can all be our full selves and complement each other at the same time. And I think the intentionality part of that, important thing that I've learned is as you're always going to keep learning, need to be learning and listening. I like that you said that. What I've learned throughout all of this, even like at our church, like at the Vine, is you start to, I think there's kind of two sides to it. You start to, at least this is for me, I'd wonder if you think this too, Ethan, get so used to it that you begin to love it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like with music, I get to lead worship sometimes at our church. I am not a gifted like gospel music worship leader. Shout out to our guy EL, who is. And we had different upbringings and different skill sets and culture that we grew up in. But with that said, and like gospel music, I love it, like listen to it. But like my go-to, like if I'm by myself, like worship music is songs like I knew that are a little bit easy for me to play musically and stuff like that. But at the same time on a Sunday, like if we're not singing some songs that maybe I don't know that well, or like aren't being introduced to songs that are like more gospel-y and not my culture, like I feel like something's missing. It's because to me, that's what, like, I need that because I know, like, hey, that's what we're about.
Yeah.
Not in a performative or like empty way, but it's just like, no, that complements my life. That is edifying and good for my soul to hear. Doesn't mean I'm like really good. Like those are going to be songs that I lead like from up front, because it's just, you know, that's not, I'm getting better, but like, nah, it's not my gifting, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But so I think that I like to pinpoint that to people because I think that's an important thing. And I think about our Bible study because I'm like, if we were just a monolithic culture, like we would be like, we would be missing so much. Like I can't, like, you know, the rest of the guys in our group, I can't imagine not being able to be around them and them being their full selves every single week.
Yeah.
Like we would be, again, this isn't a critique on, you know, white culture, but it's just like, hey, it would be so much more empty because everyone's not there being their full selves. Anyway, I wanted to add that in.
Yeah.
Would you say you feel similarly being part of that group?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
Even leading, you know, the SLT, the leaders.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, you just walk away with it with so much joy.
Yeah.
Because, and even, this is from a little bit more of like a kind of a Christian, like follower of Jesus point of view. But we're looking, I think you just see these people from, like when you look at like a Revelation 7 and you're seeing in somewhat of like a smaller glimpse into like, you've got all these people from all around that are coming in together to worship and to find that like one thing that truly brings us all together. So I 100% agree with you that there's just been so, like, I'll even just pick up on language. Then I'm like, oh man, like I love using this word. Like I call people cats.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just, like, sometimes I'll say it as a joke, but sometimes like I'm like, I just love picking up this language.
Yeah.
And so I think
it's how your close friends talk.
Yeah.
Some words maybe you don't pick up, or you shouldn't pick up. But yeah, that's a great example.
So, like, there's like little things like that it's like, man, I could just pick up on these little things, and I'm like, they just bring like a little smile to my face, you know. So I would 100% like agree that I think there's just more life. I think when it comes to that, to see difference and to see people who are just letting their personalities shine and letting their cultures like shine in the midst of it.
Yeah.
That we don't have to be washed into one certain way.
Yeah.
But there's a cool and beautiful way that I think that they can all culminate together.
Yeah.
And it can show itself in so many ways of like the energy in a worship setting, and the energy in a game night, the energy on the basketball court, like whatever it is. Like, I mean, it just shows itself in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Like through people's humor and through what they love and what excites them, and people learning about what other people love and doing that, like getting out of themselves a little bit. So yeah, I 100% agree.
That's beautiful. So I'd say, oftentimes, but not all the time, I think there's overlap sometimes, but it can also be separate, is prioritizing something like, racial justice, multi-ethnic community can come hand in hand with prioritizing and caring about seeing the unseen or the marginalized. It's not always that, and I don't always want to associate that with, or that to become synonymous with pitying or, you know, having false stereotypes. We talked like a little bit about this. I wonder, I love, if you're willing to even share a little bit more of your personal story. But some of this I was asking you about only briefly, because I also wanted you to share on here, like authentically, without even feeling like I've already asked you.
Yeah.
But I think even I'd wonder if some of your heart for caring about something like, there's too many terms, but like racial justice, thriving multi-ethnic community, like we've been talking about, has to do anything like with your story. I know you like have a personal story with this, but then also care like in education and stuff about caring for disabled, and what if that intersects at all with you prioritizing caring about people with disability or just the marginalized in general?
Yeah. I guess a little bit of my story to share is I was born with a muscular dystrophy called Bethel myopathy. So we kind of knew when I was in like preschool that like I couldn't keep up with my peers as well.
Okay.
Like my preschool teacher had called my mom and was saying just that there was this thing that it just looked like I couldn't keep up with everyone as well. So I always kind of knew that there was like something that I couldn't like. Yeah, we didn't get like an exact diagnosis until I was in 7th grade, I think.
Okay.
But like growing up, like I had known, like I was like, oh, I just have like a muscle weakness or something like that. So grew up with that. Started going to physical therapy at a pretty young age. I think I started going when I was 5. It went pretty much all the way through high school.
Okay.
So grew up with that and growing up, just with my body not working as well as everyone else's and wasn't as functional. So like when I was younger, it didn't really like affect me too much. There would be some cases for sure, like when we would do like the fitness tests in PE. Like I would look different. Like I could only run like 4 or 5 laps on the pacer tests, and when everyone else is doing like 50, 60 or so.
Okay.
So there was definitely like always that aspect of just kind of being different and feeling those things. But then especially like when I got into like high school was when it was like I definitely felt the insecurity with it. So like I would just be anxious about like, oh, if I go to this certain thing, like what if I'm not able to do like this certain physical task? Like how am I going to be embarrassed? Like if I can't do this certain thing, or God forbid I have to ask someone for help or do something like that. So I would just be like anxious about those little things, and it's like things that most people wouldn't ever really think too much about. Of like no one really thinks too much about like, oh, if you go to this certain events and maybe you have to get up from the floor, everyone else is like, yeah, that's fine. But for me, like I was like, getting up from the floor can be kind of tough for me. I don't want to do that in the middle of everyone. So I would just kind of isolate myself throughout high school and in areas like that, just out of the fear of looking different or potentially embarrassing myself or doing something like that. So I just kind of grew up, like I just found video games, and I was like, I could just stay home and online and not really like ever like have to put myself out there or take like a risk or do something like that.
Gotcha. Do you feel like that, like you mentioned, even coming into college and stuff and giving your life to Jesus, like all of that, how did all that, would you say, like intersect? Because I guess like physically, if we're doing something like basketball and stuff, like I know that like you're limited because of muscular dystrophy, but man, like I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like you are like an all-in guy. Like you're, like I said, like you're on the dance floor. Like you are like fully. You're one of the people I think about when I'm like, man, Ethan is always fully himself, and you're like really passionate, and you're not I don't think avoidant or like isolating, stand in the back type person. Now, so I'd wonder if how all this kind of comes together, synthesizes it all. And if I'm forcing something, like,
No,
that's not there.
There's definitely. I had joined, so the church that I was going to before I joined the Vine, had started up a college group. It was like during COVID, and everyone was kind of alone, and I was just desiring some friends and some people to hang out with, and so I was going to that church like on a pretty regular basis. Like I had been going there in high school, and I was on the AV team, so I was always doing like slides or working on the soundboard or something like that. So I was always like pretty involved with that, but it was just in terms of me actually pursuing community or like if someone wasn't asking me, like if the pastor wasn't asking me to hang out or do something like that. Like it was never something I was going to pursue really on my own self. Or and even deeper than that, like actually pursue a life of choosing Jesus.
Gotcha.
But then got invited to the college group that this guy named Jaden and Angela were leading at the time. And I knew Jaden a little bit just through seeing him at church and everything. He was like, dude, we're starting up this college group. And
Jaden and Angela, you said? Oh,
yeah. Angela.
Hey, man, shout out. We love
them.
We love Andrew. She is here babysitting our kids all the time. Yeah.
So they're awesome, and I love them so much. But Jaden was like, hey, we're kind of getting this college group started up. We would love for you to come. And my initial thought, I was like, not really. I was like,
I'm laughing because the amount of times I've heard that from people is just,
so had joined.
We should do a bonus episode on the a list of the most common responses from students when we're trying to meet students at the beginning of the semester. Yeah. That'd be funny. Anyway.
No, that's actually funny. I think like
that'd be so good.
Maybe I think I don't know is a big one.
Yeah.
Well, you get a lot of I don't knows.
Yeah. I'll let you know. Let me see.
Let me see.
See what?
Yeah. Let me see if I'm not busy or something like that. I'm like, go ahead, make your plan.
I can check my calendar. It's on my dorm room wall.
I think that's what I would do to Jaden.
Oh man.
I would be like, I might have something that I'm doing during that time. Dude, I get that during college ministry. I've gotten the response so many times. They're like, I might have to get this assignment done or something like that. So I'd say that's probably the main one if I had to guess.
I derailed you.
I might be busy.
Yeah.
I'll probably be busy during that time. But yeah, then I joined that group, and it was the first time like really in my life that I, like actually sat around a group of people that were talking about Jesus and kind of like being in a space like that. And that's where like I had met my roommates now, and like they were like all in that group. And it was like there was just a sense of like a belonging there that I just really felt. I don't really know how to explain it too much, but those guys and the girls in the group, like they just loved me so well. And they really welcomed me in, and like my friend William was checking in. He's like, "You coming to college group today?" That was like one of the first times in my life, really, that like I had someone that like would check in and be like, "Hey, you coming to this? Like we really want you here."
Yeah.
So there's definitely like a sense of, okay, like I feel like I belong, and I feel like I can be myself, and I feel like I can answer these questions I don't really know the answer to. Like we were reading a book called Crazy Love by Francis Chan.
Yeah. Oh man, that's old school.
And so like, and we're talking about topics that I've never really talked about before. But there was a way within the group that like I felt like I could answer this question. It might be wrong, but
it's okay.
They're okay with that. Yeah. And so we really just got super close with the group of guys I was with. And then during that time, like, had joined Noah's small group at the time, and so got to know him and this guy named Tiago, who were leading that Bible study. And so through that, like, I just found these group of guys that just really wanted me and really like desired me to be there. And so then through that, like, like even me going to Chicago, like, would have never been something I would have done if it wasn't for me finding my people and also, most importantly, finding Jesus in the midst of it. So it's just a sense of confidence and a sense of freedom in that. That there was this group of guys that I was hanging around with a lot that were very authentically themselves. And it gave me some power to be like, okay, I can actually I can make a little joke here and there or do something like that. And so then fast forward where we're at now, there's definitely times where I feel a little bit of I'm kind of scared, if I do this or what if I won't be able to do that. But I think for the most part, it really has just been a freedom since I've been following Jesus and getting to know other believers and other people well, that I can come in and be myself and also be willing to ask for help. And I think that's somewhat of a core of our human needs is we all need help. So I think it's that, that through, if I look at myself today compared to where I was 3 years ago, I mean, just a completely, it just takes risks and goes out there a little bit. I guess none of this fully answered your question at the beginning about how does this give me a heart for the marginalized or for
if it does,
for this group of people. But I think it does come with that, where even my heart with disability and trying to create a sense of belonging. I think I was able to experience that belonging, and so I want other people who potentially have those same anxieties and those same feelings to come into a place to actually experience freedom and experience life in this. There's still those limitations for sure, but I believe that there's so much more when it comes into it. So I think it's just being able to relate to some people in that. It's man, I feel in some way of how you're feeling coming into this, that the fears of what are people going to think, or if I tell them this thing, how are they going to react? So I apologize
that I've rubbed my eyes a bunch and yawned a few times. My contact's drying out on me as we're doing this, so it's not you, it's me. No, I love that. I think from my perspective, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to answer my question. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but even from hearing what you're saying and then knowing some of our guys that are also involved with crew, is I see a connection, because even hearing you talk about being apprehensive maybe about, or not maybe, you were sharing about being apprehensive about getting involved with something ministry at first, whether that's, because of insecurities with muscular dystrophy or a slew of other things, I guess. But talking about that, and then little by little realizing, oh man, I can be comfortable with these people. I can be my full self. I don't need to hide away any part of me. And I'm fully accepted. In fact, I'm encouraged to do so. To be all myself all the time. I think about with the racial element, some of our students of color that have gotten involved, a lot of some of their stories are being apprehensive for not that reason, but being apprehensive about, oh man, I don't know if I can trust a group that is predominantly, or at least what I'm assuming is predominantly white, that, man, maybe I'm not going to be welcome there. And that specifically has kept them in a place of, I'm not going to go, or I'm really, really apprehensive, which makes you, when you're apprehensive, there's not a lot of room for error or grace on the other party's part, it's well, if this goes poorly, then I'm not coming back type thing. And so, I don't know, man, from my point of view, I think it's cool because I see some connections there personally as I'm, as an older guy, looking at you guys and seeing man, there's there is connection there of because even I go back to even our vision with crew specifically, of every culture, that can mean a bunch of different things. We want everyone to feel fully accepted and welcome, not to pat us on the back, but because that's what the Bible is about. That's what Jesus is about. He wants everyone. That's his ministry was about racial reconciliation, racial justice. It was about caring for the marginalized. It was about healing people with disability. It was about including them and prioritizing them. And I think that's just, those are basic gospel-centered things.
Yeah.
And I'd say, like, I see all of y'all's stories, like, interconnecting, and it, you know, it's really cool. It doesn't mean we just sit around and, like, talk about it all the time, but it's like we're, like, in a sweet time of living out the fruit of, I don't know, maybe some labor heading into it, but like it's just like, man, this is who we are. Like, we don't know anything different, and like I don't want to know anything different. Like, I don't want you guys to know anything different. Like, I want in 10 years students to be sitting where you're sitting and it be the same. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to go back to, all right, now we got, you know, went the opposite direction in our monolithic culture now and have to redo all this. Who knows? Maybe that'll happen. I hope not. But that's what I think of when I think of thriving and people, you know, complimenting each other and being their full selves, you know, all the time.
Yeah.
You got more to add to that?
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's just the kind of the heart of it is Jesus would always see the people who weren't seen in some sense. And whenever you look at the people that he's inviting in, like a Luke 14, like him welcoming in the sinners and the lame and it's the people that were just outcasted. So I think that's like, I mean, that's just the heart of ministry.
It's the Jesus
like,
way.
Yeah, like is giving ourselves a place to be empathetic of there are things that I haven't necessarily experienced, but I can listen and I can hear where you're at and being able to connect through that. But yeah, like I think so much of what Jesus calls us to is helping the needy, helping these other groups, and even actively seeking those groups, and seeking the people who maybe have been outcasted, the people who have felt these places of insecurity in all these places, to give them a place where they can come in and feel alive. To not feel like closed in by whatever like things that we should kind of shackle ourselves with. So I think that's just like the heart of it is naturally like we want to, I think we tend to lean more towards the people that we're like and the people that we're with, but there definitely comes an intentionality with it. For me to go, or for anyone to go, like say on a Thursday night or on a Sunday at church, to go talk to the person that's not talking to anyone, or to go go seek out the one, who has been, who might not be connecting well. So I think there's a cool way that we're all able to connect with each other. So 100%. Like I think, like I don't want to grow apathetic towards it. I don't want to lose a heart for it. And it's something I just want to continue to learn more about and continue to grow in. What does it actually look like to seek out people and seek people out the way that Jesus did?
Yeah. Has there ever been a point where you've wanted to give up?
That's a good question.
Maybe not completely, but even little things like, dang, prioritizing this is too hard. I wish it was my preference.
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally it's going to be harder to try to get this. Like even, I'll speak from like a disability inclusion aspect. Like I think in kind of my own personal viewpoint and conviction is like, I think there just should be a place of a belonging for all people. And I think even in some ways, I think like what ministries have maybe done has been to have like this certain ministry just for people who are disabled or for people who have certain disabilities. And I don't know if I'm fully on board with that in terms of a Christian community aspect.
Like, you don't know if they should be a thing, or
no, it's not in that sense. But I think like they'll have like their own certain thing that's not with everyone else. If that makes sense. So there is like an aspect of like it's gonna be harder to really like make sure that all these people are included because we're gonna have to accommodate in so many different ways, and maybe even give up some own things of ourselves that, like certain games or certain like things that might seem more fun or something like that.
Yeah.
If it's truly like the mission that we stand behind, and so like even making a space of like, where people can belong. And especially like people that might have certain limitations or can't do all the same things that other people can. So it's a tough thing that honestly I don't have the best answer for of how do we do it or how do we get it right. But I think if anything, like it's giving me more of a desire just to want to research more, to want to look after Jesus more, to see how he lived and how he did it. And implement that into our own lives and implement that into our communities and all the aspects of life that we're in. So naturally, like I think it would be easier just to do things like how it always is, or people are showing up. Heck yeah. But I think continually like just having the heart of like, a growth mindset that, oh man, we could make this game more inclusive. We could even intentionally be seeking out these certain areas.
I was thinking even, sorry, I may cut you off.
No, you're good.
At you being over the youth at our church, I think that the whether it's been you or some of the leaders at the church like have reached out to me and a couple other people of color who are at the church that whatever lead in various ways. When there's, February is Black History Month. We're pretty intentional about even in the kids' curriculum. Talking about Black history, but also we're pretty intentional about, hey, we want to just have a diverse, like, historical perspective on the Bible, but then also history. We don't want to shy away from talking about history. I feel like that could be an easy, maybe not, I'm not saying you're dealing with this, but that could be for maybe a listener listening right now, like a good example, in my opinion, of, man, it'd be so much easier if I'm teaching Sunday school to just, hey, like, let's just teach, like, you can't go wrong with talking about Jesus or teaching a Bible story. Like, why do we need to, do extra research or add on anything? That there's plenty of Bible studies out there that are planned and we can implement already, but take some prioritization, and that's a great opportunity to, oh man, let me do a little bit more research. Let me figure out how to implement this into our lesson as part of our lesson and touch on Christ's heart for diversity of his heart for every culture, his heart for multi-ethnicity and thriving multi-ethnicity, not because it's a peripheral or secondary issue, but it's something that historically, for better and for worse, mostly for worse, we Christians haven't really focused on correctly. And to me, I think that at times, if you're not really committed to it, it's like, man, gosh, I don't want to do this, man. Like, screw this. Like, I'm just going to preach Jesus and we'll move on. And it's like, well, you can do that, but also the intentionality based on, this conversation, what we've been talking about, I'd wonder if you have experienced that at all, if that's been any kind of learning curve, or even at times, I don't know if you be honest, like it's been difficult at times. I don't know. Maybe it hasn't been. Our youth group is definitely still like we're growing for sure. It's been a lot of trial and error. Like when I had first kind of started it over the summer, quickly realized that doing like a Bible study type of teaching time was not the move. Okay.
with the group of middle schoolers. That every single kid raises their hands. I'm like, oh gosh. So we switched into like trying to get more of a just
that's funny.
Kind of smoothing it out and and getting it. And
So I went to private Christian school growing up.
Yeah.
So which means I didn't really do youth group. I was like, I'd get it. I don't need more of that anyway.
Yeah. So it's been like a lot of trial and error with it. But I think like even just this past semester, like I was talking about it with this other family that really like helps me out a lot with the youth group. About like how like we want more female representation, like when it comes to speaking, because like majority of teaching time would be like me or the husband. His name's Craig.
That's such a good example.
Yeah.
Like the prioritizing women speaking or understanding women and leadership in women in general.
Yeah.
Like that's for me. That's a great heart check for me. Regularly.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I came with my wife pretty well too, Ethan. But, yeah, man, I say that. I mean, I'm surrounded by a lot of strong women. I have a lot of women that are above me and like are my bosses or superiors in a lot of different settings, and including my wife, like when we work together. And so that's always a great heart check for me as well. Of like, I care all about this race stuff all the time, but then bring up women's like, okay. Yeah, that's going to take more intentionality than this race stuff is because that's where my heart is. But anyway, yeah.
Because, I mean, even like going on like it would probably just be easier if
just
I
keep being a man. So much easier. That's facts,
something like that. But yeah, like I mean, even like it would potentially just be easier for myself. Of like, I'm like I feel confident teaching, and so like I'm like I can just teach most weeks, and
that's a great example.
Or like Craig, who's the other guy, like he'll teach some weeks, and but in some way, like I'm almost doing a disservice to this group of kids.
Yeah.
Then I'm like,
disservice is a good word.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, one, they just need to hear the word spoken to them from different people. Like, I'll be able to tell you a few things, but I only know so much. And so I think being able to one, just serve them better by giving them really awesome people to come and speak. And also giving, like I've talked to the other mom in the group about like how she's like we had a FCA volunteer who was a girl that came to speak one week, and she's like, I really just want my daughter to come in and hear from another female, like from a college female. And so and we actually have like a fairly like mixed group in terms of racially, but then also gender and everything like that. So it definitely comes with like an intentionality of wanting just to have more representation in terms of even just speaking. And then through the content, like this past semester we went through Sermon on the Mount. So you're getting into like a lot of like passages that are very like justice oriented in some sense of like loving your neighbor well and taking out the plank in your own eye before you judge another person. And
justice often comes hand in hand with humility.
So it's even like, I mean, it's somewhat naturally coming up in the word and just as we're teaching, but it's also, I mean, there's definitely growth in that aspect for myself, even like as pursuing more conversations about that and pursuing more conversations about what does it look like to have a heart for this and to do something like that. So it's definitely something that we're growing in, and but also I think that through the help of having a team with me and having other people who give great insights and great ideas, just being able to hear those and with the desire of implementing them. So it's like these things don't go unnoticed or unaware. Like we're aware of these things.
That's awesome.
And so I think that's the start of it, is that we got to be aware. So I'm not just like glossing over. It's like, oh, I've just been a guy speaking the entire semester, you know?
Yeah.
Let's get some
easy to do.
Yeah, like let's get some different voices up here in doing this. So I think it just comes a lot with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great answer.
Yeah. So just figuring that out. And then even like you talked about with history, like that's what I'm teaching in middle schools right now.
Okay.
Is I'm a social studies.
Oh man, we didn't even get there. I should have asked you more about that too.
Which I don't know how much more time we got, but
yeah.
But I mean, there's like so many examples of like I taught U.S. history this past semester.
Okay.
So like we're talking about like immigration and people coming in from like for religious freedom and things like that. Like when people are traveling to America. So
I feel like oh man, we could do a whole nother episode on the education stuff, but like I feel like education even is a little different because that is you gotta deal with the laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like what are you allowed to say?
Yeah.
As it mixes with what are you willing to say?
Yeah.
Man, yeah. We'll have to get into that another time. Kind of speaking of that, let's wrap up. So like I'll let you kind of get out of here on this, but what is as you're heading into your last semester?
Yeah.
And with the backdrop of all the things we've been talking about, you're a Gen Z, you're the Gen Z representative in our conversation. So what is I like to end on hopeful things. Like this has been a very hopeful conversation, but not always. All my conversations on here aren't always hopeful.
Yeah.
What is like something that you're encouraged by or hopeful moving forward for the times we're in right now? Because I feel like it can be really easy to just be in negative town heading into 2025. What with the backdrop of things we've been talking about is something you're hopeful about? It can be like personal and or broadly speaking.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in terms of, I think I'm hopeful for that. There's just starting to become more training in these aspects.
Yeah.
Like I think even like in just the school systems, it's like they're training us on like how do we do multicultural education. It's like I've taken classes like at RU about multicultural education and teaching students with diverse learning needs. So I think I'm hopeful in that sense that I think like even in the church that I think we in Christian organizations in general, like I think we're actively taking steps in terms of like equipping and training people to actually be able to do this. Which I think is something that has potentially lacked in years prior. But I think that there is much more, and maybe this is just in my setting, maybe it's not in everywhere, but that I just feel like there is a lot more opportunity to be equipped in being able to interact and engage with this kind of stuff, and engage with diversity and in just pursuing a more diverse community in a community that isn't as separated, that there's not as much hostility between the groups.
Less polarization for sure.
Yeah. So I think like I'm just hopeful for that the more and more that like we just continue to equip and train people. How do we love well? I'm just excited to see what that can actually do.
That's awesome. I'm hopeful hearing that summary of even stuff you're learning in the schools right now, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff out there to make you want to believe that that's not happening, and so I'm super encouraged that that's where you're at. Oh,
yeah.
I echo that same sentiment of I hope that type of training, education, whatever you want to call it, in multiple settings continues to increase in the church, in the education system. Man, I think that I always feel this way, at least so far, when I talk to y'all younger cats.
Yeah, young cats.
Gen Zers, like you guys got it. You guys got it.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to criticize y'all for being soft or anything. Y'all have gone through it. Y'all, we're in good hands. Older folk.
Yeah.
Look, man, I appreciate you coming on. This was so helpful and hopeful.
Yeah.
Like I said, it doesn't always feel like that, the nature of these conversations, but I'm very encouraged, and I hope our listeners are too, by your story. Your stories, really. But, man, who you are, Ethan, you're an encouraging guy. And I'm thankful for the commitment to all these things we talked about, all these causes and the multiple generations you're affecting by just, I'd say, I think something that keeps coming to my mind in conversations is faith the size of a mustard seed, that like just even doing little things and letting Jesus do the rest is really what I feel like you've been doing. And that, man, that's super encouraging and hopeful. And listeners, I hope you guys can take some of that encouragement away from this episode. But Ethan, thank you so much for doing this. I'm about to have you back for some more of the education stuff. But man, I'm excited for this next semester we're heading into.
Yeah.
Excited for you to be in the workforce, whatever that would look like afterwards. So happy early graduation. I know that's a long way off,
Hopefully.
but it's really not a long way off.
Yeah.
Listeners, thank you so much for listening. The music you're listening to was done by our guy Dylan Dent. Our artwork was created by Ashley Bush. And we'll see y'all next time. All right, peace.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.